Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. And remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcasts from. We got a great show for you guys today. Rickard Rakell is back with the team on their 7-game road trip, but what does that mean for the Penguins forward lineup? Also, Kyle Dubas had a response to this week's fire sale reports, making his intentions perfectly clear with the trade deadline slowly approaching. And then can Alex Nedeljkovic continue his resurgent stretch as the Penguins' #1 goaltender? Let's get started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. And let's kick things off with some good news for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is Rickard Rakell returning to the team, returning to the road trip after missing Monday's game, heading back to Pittsburgh for personal reasons. He officially returned to practice yesterday in Anaheim, and thanks to Penn's Inside Scoop, we have the forward line rushes here. Rakell abruptly back with Crosby and Rust, as I think we all expected. Michael Bunting is with Evgeny Malkin and Cody Glass. Anthony Beauvillier, after a great game on Monday, bumps down to the third line alongside Kevin Hayes and newly minted untouchable Phil Tomasino. And then Drew O'Connor skated with Nola Chari at center and Matt Nieto and Blake Lizotte switching off on the right side. Horwat, what are your thoughts on this shuffled bottom six? Because I think it's mainly due to the fact that Beauvillier has earned an opportunity to not play fourth line minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's mostly Beauvillier earning his role with the team, going from that first line spot and then not fourth line, but also still remaining in the lineup, which is for him the most important part, especially considering the lengthy discussion we had last episode about him possibly being a trade piece. There's all kind of factors that play into keeping him in the lineup for the Penguins, and he's earned it. It's good to see him still up there. Very intrigued about the did you say Nola Chari was center on that? I kind of forgot already.
Yeah, according to Penn's Inside Scoop, Nola Chari was a fourth line center. O'Connor was on the left, and then Nieto, Lizotte were switching out, but it could have been a 3-man rotation on wing.
Yeah, and I know Chari can and has played center. That just hasn't been a lot of his forte this year, I think. Oh, no, decent amount of faceoffs this year. I mean, it's an interesting position, I guess, but overall, I mean, it's not too much changed. Not too many changes, I guess. I'd like to see Nieto remain in the press box if possible at the end of the day, just because I just think the team's better without him in it. And, like we said, Beauvillier has been earning his spot, and it's good to see Rickard Rakell back in. He should come back like he missed nothing. It was really only a game anyway, and he got lucky that there was a couple of days off between West Coast games.
Yeah, certainly. The one thing I'll say about this is the fourth line needed a shakeup. It's not that they were playing poorly, because I think there were, especially on Monday, I think everybody played well on Monday for the Penguins, and that include Matt Nieto. But I think the fourth line just needed a little bit of a shakeup, because what they're doing when they're at their best over this last stretch was getting the puck out of their own zone, putting it in the offensive zone, and just holding on to it. And I understand sometimes that's all you want your fourth line to do. But I mean, how many games has it been since Nola Chari has scored? How many games has it been since Matt Nieto has scored? How many games has it been since Blake Lizotte has scored? I mean, none of these guys are, I mean, I understand you're not expecting them to be among your leaders in goal scoring, but it gets to a certain point where, all right, something needs to change here. Drew O'Connor has kind of found his footing a little bit, so maybe dropping him to that fourth line helps add to some scoring potency, but I think more so Chari needed a reset. Moving him to center may do that. And I think you're trying to get a similar result as to what we've seen out of the third line in recent games, where Hayes isn't the most fleet of foot. He's not the best skater, but being surrounded by quick, speedy wingers is allowing that line to create some offense. When Hayes gets his opportunities, he holds onto the puck, he makes the right play, but a lot of the work, a lot of the dirty work, if you want to say that, was done by O'Connor and Tomasino and Glass and Beauvillier, because they're the ones getting in on the forecheck. They're the ones creating havoc in the offensive zone against opposing defenders. maybe that's what OC and Lizotte can do and allow Acciari to kind of lay back and kind of pick his spots in the offensive zone. If that's the case, I like it. Now, again, I agree with you. I think of anybody that's going to be the odd man out, it should probably be a Matt Nieto, because I just don't think that him with Acciari at center is a recipe for success. Just not from what I've seen this season. And I think obviously Lizotte, while he hasn't scored a lot lately, I think has played well enough that he doesn't deserve to be a healthy scratch. So if it's O'Connor, Acciari, Lizotte, like I expect it to be, I can kind of see the forest through the trees and what Mike Sullivan's trying to accomplish there.
Yeah, and O'Connor being down there just makes a lot of sense too, just because it's been, a different season for him than it was last year. He is more of that depth role guy this time around, and plopping him to the fourth line isn't a knock on him. It isn't a demotion even. It just feels like more of, this is the position you should be playing this year because of, again, not even regression, but just because it's not the same year as last year, and this feels more like his role for at least this season. If he picks it up next year, then it's a different situation.
Yeah, if he makes it to next year, because remember, he's also a name that's been tossed around as a potential trade piece. But I think it's more to do with Beauvillier and the way that he's played. And you don't want to put a guy who scored 2 goals in 3 games on a fourth line that, like we said, is struggling to score. So I think it says more about Beauvillier and how the Penguins are rewarding that more than a demotion for O'Connor. At least that's the way that I'm looking at it. But we'll have to wait and see. Penguins take on the Anaheim Ducks with another late start this evening in Game 4 of their season-long 7-game road trip. Let's move over and talk a little bit about Kyle Dubas, because yesterday he went on the GM show with Josh Getzoff on the Penguins radio network, and he dismissed, I think that's the best way to put it, he dismissed reports of a Penguins fire sale that we heard earlier this week from Marco D'Amico at rg.org and Montreal Hockey Now, who wrote that a fire sale was not just potentially, but imminent was the headline. Named Crosby, Malkin, Rust, Pickering, and Tomasino as, quote, off limits. We talked about that interesting list, especially the name Tomasino being on that list. But Kyle Dubas himself had a response. Like I mentioned, this was on his bi-weekly hit with Josh Getzoff on the GM show yesterday. Quote, every team in the league knows what we're trying to achieve. As our actions have shown from last March on, we're trying to bring in younger NHL players, we're trying to bring in prospects, and we're trying to bring in draft picks, with the goal being to quickly develop those assets into people that can help the core group of the team here win one more time and then set the team up for a long-range future. Dubas went on to say, quote, to say it's a fire sale and we're willing to retain money on very long-term deals, I understand how that stuff starts to get out and take on a life of its own, but it's not accurate. I think that last 4 words sums up the entire statement. Your thoughts, Horwat, on Kyle Dubas quickly shutting down these rumors of a fire sale?
It doesn't shock me. I think every GM would, in this position, say the same thing, essentially. Because, like I said, kind of referenced a little bit last episode, everyone may have a different definition of the term fire sale.
Yes.
For what it's worth, we at Breakaway on SI literally said the Penguins started a fire sale in mid-November. Just throwing that out there. We used that term already.
Yeah.
And it mostly
around the Lars Eller deal.
It was right after the Lars Eller deal. That's kind of what spurred it. And at the time, yeah, it seemed like they were ready for it. It seemed like Lars Eller was the first piece to fall. And then they started winning, started taking on some better play, and sort of the trajectory of that term fire sale changed. But if it's worth anything and coming from me, or at least the brand that I write with, because I think it was Jacob Turry, friend of the show, who was the one that used that title, but we've used it before. So this is nothing new for the Penguins. It just kind of caught new fire with this report because, I mean, Marco's report did have more than just a term, the fire sale is starting. There was the in-depth analysis on what's going on with Karlsson. I totally believe that Kyle Dubas doesn't want to retain on a Karlsson trade if it happens. He didn't say that's not happening, by the way. He said that there is not a fire sale happening. That's all he really said.
Well, and he said the fact that we're willing to retain money on very long-term deals. I think that's a direct response to not only Erik Karlsson, but guys like Ryan Graves, guys like Tristan Jarry. I think that's the part that he's saying. One, it's not a fire sale. the plan has been what the plan has been. And I think that's the biggest thing that Kyle Dubas is saying is like, hey, I've been very open about my plan, and it's been very clear in pretty much every move that's been made since the Jake Gensel deal. That was the turn of this plan. That was the impetus of this version of what Kyle Dubas is trying to do for the Penguins. And everything's kind of followed suit. The Kevin Hayes trade follows suit. You're bringing in a veteran there, but you're doing that in order to bring in that more draft picks for absolutely nothing. Cody Glass trade, the Riley Smith trade, the Phil Tomasino trade that we talked about on Tuesday is, hey, he's part of this off-limits group because he is seemingly the picture-perfect candidate that Kyle Dubas is going after. I mean, we've heard Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet and 32 Thoughts tie them to the Buffalo Sabres because of guys like Peyton Krebs, guys like Dylan Cousins. So I think this is just Dubas saying, like, guys, I have told you what this is. If something goes out that is opposite to that, like a fire sale and me retaining salary, which we all know he's been very open about not wanting to retain salary on anything, let alone long-term deals, I think he's just adamant saying, hey, you should know what I'm doing because I've told you expressly. So it makes sense. And it's just kind of like a reiteration of, hey, from the horse's mouth, nothing's changing based on a given week stretch or a given homestand or a given performance on a road trip. He's staying true to what he's been doing since last March. And I think that's a nice clarification that everybody gets to see.
Yeah. And I do think it's just, again, everyone looking at the term fire sale differently.
Yes. We said on Tuesday that we heard fire sale last year and 3 players got traded and one of them was an AHL goalie.
Yeah. This year, again, like I said, it seems a little more likely considering some of the names that might be moving, or at least that he's shopping. We already know about Jarry. We know Pettersson's basically as good as gone. O'Connor might be joining the list. Rakell might be as good as gone this summer. There's going to be a lot of moves. And for what it's worth, the verbiage that Dubas just used there also was, we're trying to add prospects. We're trying to add pieces. We're trying to add draft picks. Well, how do you add those?
Yeah, you trade away.
You sell pieces. Again, not fire sale pieces, but you sell pieces off.
Yeah.
So again, I think I don't even want to say that everything's kind of lost in translation when it comes to the term fire sale, but you can see where a lot of what Marco's coming from, because again, in his piece, he discusses the Karlsson and the Letang bits that Josh Yohe put something out the next day, almost matching what Marco said exactly, which is Karlsson can probably have it at the right price. The retention part's different. I think that's like the biggest difference there is that the Penguins don't want to retain.
Yeah, and especially on long-term deals.
Yeah, and they wouldn't with Karlsson.
Yeah.
But straight up, with Letang not being on that list of pieces that are locked in, the source with Marco said that he just doesn't know. I took that as he's probably still locked in.
Yeah.
And then Josh Yohe, in so many words, said he could be had at the right price, it seems, genuinely. He has the ability to turn it down.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely that the Penguins would approach him about it. But if the right call came and the right offer came, you never know. Anyone can be had at the right price, to be fair.
Almost anyone. I would say almost anyone. There are a few players in the league, not just on the Penguins, but I think the Penguins do have one of those players that you could offer the world and they'd be like, no, Sidney Crosby is not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was good on Kyle to get out and say that, the fire sale isn't happening. Here's what I'm trying to do, reiterating it. It depending on how the trades go, I think everyone will look at it differently. Looking back in a couple years, maybe he does pull off all the trades of all the names I just mentioned. Yeah. Maybe in a couple years we go, the Lars Eller trade was the first of a pretty big sale that happened for the Penguins, depending on who comes back.
Yeah.
It could be interesting. It is, again, every little piece of reporting that you see, I don't think people need to blow up and say, well, this person is wrong because they're based in Montreal. They don't know the facts. They don't know this. They don't know that. Listen, someone told Marco something. It's from a trusted person from a person that he trusted. I have people that tell me stuff that I trust, and it's just the way, I don't even want to say that this industry works, but it's just the way that it goes, that if he trusts what he's hearing and he's hearing it and it's part of his job to put that into the world, that's what he's going to do. And I, applaud him for it. And again, like I said, a lot of what he wrote matched what Yohe wrote. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And the fire sale thing, again, you never know. Maybe we look back at it and go, that was a fire sale. Little do we know, because let's also not act like after every loss, this fan base doesn't beg for trades and firings.
Well, this is true.
All the time.
Let me ask you this to close out this discussion.
Yeah.
Last year, we heard the term, I think I tried to go back and find it, but I feel like I remember reading something where somebody said everybody is on the table except for Crosby. I remember reading that last year when they were in the depths of that stretch where they looked like they just did not want to be at the rink. And that was leading up to the Jake Gensel trade when he was on the injured list and they just weren't playing well. I feel like I remember reading that. And yet, as we mentioned Tuesday, 3 players went. Gensel, Hellberg, Ruhwedel.
Yeah.
Between now and the trade deadline on March 7th, do you expect more or less than 3 players to be traded from the Penguins? Just, again, if you had to guess, this is not having to do with anything, but right now, looking at the landscape of the league and the Penguins, do you think we see more or less than 3 players on the move?
I'm going to take the push and say it's on 3 again.
You say it's on 3? I'm going to say it ends up being less.
Less, because I could see Pettersson being the obvious one. I could see O'Connor as well, and we're not gonna count minor league moves. Depending on the name, I guess we could, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to count minor league moves. And I could just see another one sort of floating in there that maybe we didn't expect.
Emil Bemstrom.
Yeah, and I would count that as an NHLer because he played with the team last year and will likely make an NHL team wherever he goes. I could see it being at 3 because Rakell's going to be the summer. He's not going to find a partner for Jarry this year. Maybe in the summer, we'll see. And Graves is just too tough to move.
Especially if you don't want to retain salary on a long-term deal.
Yeah, especially for the rest of the NHL squad, it seems fairly locked in. Although, again, one quick losing stretch, forget it.
Well, that
changes everything.
Here's the thing. Again, it feels like it's not up to what happens on the ice for the Penguins. It feels like Kyle Dubas is locked into a direction based on what he said yesterday. I think it's going to be less because I think the Vancouver Canucks are kind of screwing over all the teams that want to sell. Match that with the fact that everybody in the East is still in the playoff race with a month and a half to go. I think that there's not going to be a lot of movement in general. So I agree with you. I think Marcus Pettersson, it's likely because there hasn't been very many discussions about a contract extension, and he has been rumored to be on the trade block all season long. So I think that move eventually gets done. And Drew O'Connor on an expiring deal is going to look very, very appetizing for a good Western Conference team. I think that his style play fits very well in the bottom 6 of most Western Conference contenders, to be completely honest. So I think those 2, they could find a trade partner for. I think it's going to be a very truncated negotiating period because I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people aren't going to do anything over 4 Nations face-off. And I think that matched with the fact that right now Vancouver is holding everybody up with the JT Miller of it all. I think that because of that, there's not a lot of movement and potentially only 2 players end up getting moved and maybe even less. Maybe it's only Pettersson. Shoot. Maybe they go undefeated. That's the only way I could see the on-ice direction changing the off-ice direction. If they go undefeated between now and March 7th, which might be, I don't remember how many games they have, but it might get close to an NHL record. Then maybe they say, all right, you know what? Let's pump the brakes. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But outside of that, I still see them kind of holding true because that's what Kyle Dubas has been adamant about all season long and certainly adamant about yesterday on the GM show. Let's go over and talk about goaltending because that's honestly, I'm not going to lie, Horwat, goaltending is my favorite topic. I love talking about goaltenders because they are the most interesting humans in the league, just in general. I mean, we all saw a lot of the clips that have come out from Penguin social media. Alex Nedeljkovic really gets into card games. Not that other players don't, but Alex Nedeljkovic almost punched a hole in the plane because he lost a hand, not the game. He lost a hand, but let's talk about Nedeljkovic. 2-0-0 with a 1.5 goals against average, a .956 save percentage, and 3.76 goals saved above expected since Tristan Jarry was demoted last week to the AHL. Nedeljkovic also became the first goalie in NHL history to score a goal and an assist in the same game. He became the first Penguins goalie since 1999 in Tom Barrasso to score 2 points in a game. And this is a real opportunity for him to now solidify a spot in Pittsburgh as that veteran goaltender that can shepherd the 2 young goalies of the future. Guys like Blomqvist, who looked good against Washington, and a guy like Murashov, who has been moved up to the AHL and is going to get an extended look at that level. The question that I have for you, Horwat, is, do you have faith that Ned can maintain his current performance or something similar, because no goaltenders are maintaining a .956 save percentage right now?
Yeah, he probably won't maintain a .956, but certainly believe that he can keep up a very good pace. He's done it before. Did it last year. Again, it wasn't a phenomenal run, but it was pretty good. He got it. He did enough to help the Penguins win quite a few games down the stretch in a, I don't want to say very similar situation, because Tristan Jarry was still at the NHL level last year, but it seemed pretty clear that he had lost his job. And for the moment, it seems pretty clear that Tristan Jarry's lost his job. So I would say it's almost, or at least very similar to a repeat of last year, in that Nedeljkovic is going to get the runway here. Blomqvist is here too, to get plenty of games in, to get some time, to get some, visuals to see what he can do. But for now, it looks like it's going to be Nedeljkovic's net. It's going to be his until Jarry proves he can actually do something in the NHL. If that even happens again this year, we'll see. Mm-hmm. So I would say, yeah, I think he can do it again. Whenever it was both of them, both Nedeljkovic and Jarry last year, I remember there being this whole idea that having 2 NHL starting caliber goalies on the same roster should bring the best out of both of them. They should be fighting for the top spot. They should be, trying to bring out the best that they can. If anything, it may have added too much pressure onto them, and they both kind of saw their wheels stumble a bit. Because last year, once it was just Ned's net, he took off. Yeah. This time around, if it's just Ned's net, maybe he takes off again because that pressure's gone. It's his spot. He can just sort of play his game without looking behind him to see if Jarry's in the rear view. Same for Jarry, maybe, if Ned's not in the rear view. Again, I don't know how Jarry reacts to all of that. We've gotten a couple seasons of experience of him being the guy, and we see how it's gone. Now it's just Ned's turn to take over for himself. I do think he can do it again, much in the way that he did last year.
Yeah, I mean, do you think Jarry could have potentially looked at what's behind him in Joe Blomqvist and Sergei Murashov and say, oh, I was the last in a line of young guys that were coming up, and I ended up taking the job, right? It was Fleury gave way to Murray. Murray gave way to Jarry. So Jarry's seen this story play out. Maybe he's sitting there saying, oh, crap. They restocked behind me, and now they got 2 young guys that are kind of banging on the door for opportunity. Joe Blomqvist being the first to get there, and Sergei Murashov being there as well. But not to mention, I mean, Philip Larson, before he got injured, very good numbers at the AHL. And Taylor Gauthier, as we continuously say, ECHL goalie of the year last year. It will be interesting to see what he's able to do with an extended opportunity at that level again. Can he kind of maintain that? But, when I look at Nedeljkovic's side of this, I could see him replicating that late season form. It's not like it was a high bar to clear, like you mentioned. 902 save percentage, 283 goals against average. Is that better than the kind of median performance that we've been seeing in net this year? By a mile. But is it something where it's unachievable? No. I think that Alex Nedeljkovic could replicate that and probably do a little bit better. Now, his numbers this year are a lot lower simply because I think early in the year, 1, he didn't get a lot of playing time. 2, the defense in front of him was absolutely god-awful. They've done a lot to kind of quell those concerns, and now I think you're seeing Alex Nedeljkovic with that and with this kind of vote of confidence of, hey, you are now the veteran with a young guy. I think that has kind of gotten into him and saying, yeah, this is my opportunity again, similar to what we saw last season where the net was handed to him. The only difference is I think it's really going to be a hot hand situation here, right? There's 4 games left on this road trip. There's a day in between each of those games. I wouldn't be surprised if they ran with Ned tonight and then they said, all right, if you continue to perform well, then you'll get 3 of the next 4. If you take a couple of steps back, we're going to give Blomqvist a couple of games. I think it's really going to be a ride the hot hand versus a you're number 1, you're number 2. But with Ned being the veteran, you have to think that a tie is going to lean in his favor in this next stretch of games leading into the Four Nations face-off.
Yeah, I think so. And that'll be a good little reset period for the Penguins and their goaltending. Just for all involved. Everyone's going to be taking some time off. Maybe there'll be some workouts. I mean, Jarry might even be in the A playing games. Maybe even Blomqvist is back in the A playing games just to keep the reps under him, like we discussed with Pickering not too long ago doing that.
Potentially, yeah.
That'll just be interesting to see. Again, I don't think it makes too much of a difference one way or the other if they are, going to continue play during those 2 weeks or not. However, it's going to be a good reset period for the Penguins and their goaltending and just regroup no matter how this next trip goes, no matter how these next handful of games goes. Regroup, bring your A game when you come back because that's when everything really heats up and takes on a new life. The Four Nations will be over. The next big thing to look forward to will be the trade deadline, which
you only have 2 weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks between the end of Four Nations and the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of teams are trying to do a lot of their work beforehand, so we'll see what everything does leading up to it. But in the 2 weeks after, it could be just as busy because now that that's over, I mean, teams also can make trades while that's happening. But they won't. If anything, they won't be blockbuster deals because all the blockbuster deal players will be playing.
Yeah.
But it'll be a busy 2 weeks, and for what it's worth, maybe Nedeljkovic becomes one of those names that is part of the list of names that Kyle Dubas trades because maybe he's playing well, but the team isn't, and they need the change. Maybe Jarry's picking it up in the AHL. I expect him to. He should. He's an NHL caliber goalie.
And he's not only that, he's playing behind one of the best teams in the AHL.
Yeah, so it'll be tough for Jarry to really. It'll be tough to really read Jarry at the AHL level, but
yeah, that and just the way that it sounded yesterday when Dubas was speaking with Josh Getzoff on the GM show, like he likened it to a complete rebuild of a car. Like he said, he did say, like, treat this like you're in your early 20s. Like that doesn't sound like Tristan Jarry's coming back anytime soon. It sounds like they're going to want him to be down there to really kind of get into the minutia of his game and his confidence level. So again, read into it what you will. Go back and listen to it. Josh does a phenomenal job every 2 weeks with Kyle and every other week with Sully. But it sounded to me like Tristan Jarry is down there for an extended period to try to figure things out because, I mean, you need them to figure things out. Like we've mentioned, buyouts not really an option. Trades right now, not really an option. You need to figure it out with the goaltender, and it seems like they're going to give him an extended period down there in the AHL. And when that happens, maybe that makes it less likely that Nedeljkovic. I think hearing that to me makes it less likely that Nedeljkovic is floated out there at all leading up to March 7th. But let's close out this episode with a look outside of Pittsburgh because we don't do that very often, but I think now is the time to do it because the Eastern Conference is an absolute mess. I don't know what other way to put it. It is just a crapshoot, to be completely honest. And this question was asked yesterday on the live stream by Golf Legends. I didn't see it, unfortunately, until after the live had ended, but let's answer it now. Looking at the Eastern Conference, and I'll pull up the standings here, which two teams do you trust to grab the final 2 wildcard spots? If you're looking at the standings, which we have up here, if you're watching us on YouTube, Columbus and Ottawa are currently the 2 teams sitting in the wildcard positions. Columbus has 53 points. Ottawa has 52. And then there's 2 other teams tied with Ottawa, Montreal and Boston, with 52 points. 2 points behind them are the Rangers and the Flyers. 2 points behind them are the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then Detroit's a point behind the Pens. The Islanders are 2 points behind the Pens, and then there's a drop-off, and then there's the Buffalo Sabres. So that's the Eastern Conference as of this recording. When you look at that picture, Horwat, who do you trust? Like, what are the 2 teams, if you had to predict now, that are going to kind of end up on top of the wild card race and end up in the playoffs?
It's so tough to tell. It really is. Let's also not discount that the Senators are just a point behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are 3rd place in the Atlantic.
Yes.
So throw them in that conversation just as a team that might have to deal with this. I mean, if anyone, I would say they're the team that takes one of the spots, clearly, because they're also going to be fighting for that top 3 in the Atlantic position. There's just a gap between them and the Panthers. Other than Tampa's the 1A, but then when it comes to the other two choices, I'd say Ottawa's in there as long as Omar can come back healthy and keep playing at the level that he was. That's a team that can sneak their way in. Oh, man, and then you look at everyone else. I mean, Columbus is just the biggest and best surprise of this NHL season so far. They're in a great spot. I just don't know if they can maintain it. We'll see what they do at the deadline, really. They have pieces they're trying to get rid of, but who knows? Montreal's a fascinating team right now. I don't know if they can do it, but again, they might sneak in. Boston and New York seem like disasters, just unmitigated disasters, yet New York's on a 10-game point streak or something stupid like that.
I was going to say, I agree with you with Ottawa. Let's just start there. I agree with you with Ottawa. I think they're going to make it because Allmark, again, I trust goaltending, and if Allmark is healthy, he is probably one of the best goaltenders of all of these teams. Yeah. Not to mention, they are tied with the best when it comes to most road wins among all these teams. And again, that's a good indicator of what teams can kind of do it down the stretch, is who's good on the road. So I agree with you with Ottawa, but the Rangers have been a crapshoot most of the season, but they're 6-1-3 in their last 10. And again, I trust good goaltending. Shesterkin is starting to turn a corner. Yeah. And because of that, and the fact that Trouba drama is getting further and further behind them, I think I have to go with the Rangers here. It hurts my soul, but I think I have to go with the Rangers here. However, I reserve the right to change my mind if they blow it all up for JT Miller, because I think that would do more harm than good in that locker room. So as of right now, I would say Rangers Senators, but I do reserve the right to change my mind if Chris Drury does another Chris Drury thing and makes a crazy move for JT Miller.
Yeah, I want to throw this out to you too, because I threw it out to you. It was either last week or 2 weeks ago whenever I said the Rangers are going to turn this around and just bumble their way into the playoffs.
Yeah.
You pretty quickly shot that down. It's funny seeing the tables turning. But yes, it's one thing because you look at their streak that they're on, they're not blowing these teams out. It's
finding a way to win.
It's a couple of 2-1 wins. It's a couple of, I think there's a 1-0 win in there, a couple of 3. They're not scoring a bunch of goals. The offense still is not totally there for them. And yeah, the Trouba drama might be gone. Act like in the wake of that, there wasn't 4 more new pieces of drama to come out, though.
Yeah.
So the drama is not gone in New York. Matt Rempe scored 1 goal, and suddenly the Rangers fan base believes he's an elite player again. So congratulations, Matt Rempe, for your 1 goal this season.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can trust the Rangers just because the way you said it, Chris Drury's going to do a Chris Drury thing. The drama isn't gone yet. I think it's just kind of put on ice for the moment. Yeah. And that just means it'll come back out eventually.
Okay.
And who knows what happens with the JT Miller thing. I don't know how much that really adds to this lineup because he's been there before. Does it mean there's something different? Is there something different in the water this time around for that? They got Shesterkin rolling, which is good. But again, we know he can be pretty hot-headed and can lose his mind pretty quickly and can lose his edge pretty quickly. I just don't know if I trust that entirely and would much rather see someone else.
Trust me, if it was who I want to make it, I would not be saying the Rangers. Honestly, I'd be saying the Penguins. But there's a lot of red flags for a lot of these teams, and I'm not saying the Rangers don't have any. I'm just saying that's a team that has the talent that won the President's Trophy last year. If they can just get it together, and again, you're mentioning, they're not blowing these teams out. They're finding ways to win. But if they could just do that, that to me puts them just slightly ahead of the pack of the rest of the crap in the Eastern Conference, which the Penguins are, of course, a part of.
Yeah, and I don't see them getting back in this fight. Not in this one.
4 points out? You don't think that they make it? Do you think they make it close to where it's going to be another situation where the last 2 weeks of the season, it's hey, we're watching all of these games because if this happens and this happens, the Penguins get in the driver's seat. If this happens and this happens, the Penguins are out of it completely. But if this happens, they might clinch. Like that's what the last 2 years have been. Do you think that they're going to make it to that point of the season and still be into it this year?
I think so. I think it'll at least be close for, at least 7 of these teams, maybe even 8. Maybe even 9, maybe even all 10. I don't think Buffalo, though. So
1 week, 2 weeks changes a lot of things.
It does. consider this already, that the Senators, Canadiens, and Bruins all have 52 points, and only one of them is holding that wild card spot right now. They had to dig all the way to the third tiebreaker to give the Senators that bump into that spot. It's going to be a crapshoot of crapshoots down this stretch for all 10 teams involved. Most likely 9, most likely 8 teams, just because, again, the Sabres don't know what's going on there. Yeah. And the Islanders just all of a sudden hit a rough patch. So
yeah, you get Matt Barzell saying that it's sad how little people are at UBS Arena. But I think I cut you off earlier. You said the Senators. I said the Sens and Rangers. Close this out for us, Horwat. Who's your second team that you have faith in?
Man, you know what? Give me Montreal. I'm going to go out on the ledge. And I'm going to say all 7 Canadian teams make playoffs this year. How about that one? There's your hot take.
Ooh, I like that.
That means Vancouver sneaks in because I think they're the only one in. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not in it right now. So Ottawa, yeah. Wow. I mean, if that's the case, that's the best chance that Canada has had in 30 years to get back the Stanley Cup. Now, of course, teams like the Senators and teams like the Habs, not expected to be favorites in that run, but with the East being what it is, you never know what can happen when you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. But that's far down the line. I don't know what I expected, but I certainly didn't expect you to run Sens and Habs, the full Canadian flavor there. But I like it. I like it, Horwat.
It's going to be a fascinating run. Jacob and I just did a piece on how all 7 Canadian teams are either in the playoffs or 1 point out, which is still the truth. The Canucks are a dumpster fire, but if they get that solved quickly, and then let's say Thatcher Demko is not playing great, but let's say he turns it on at the end of the year and they have Kevin Lankinen as a great backup, or maybe 1A, 1B situation for the rest of the season. Again, the feud's over with. Pettersson can maybe get back to his game. Miller's out of the house. Maybe they pick things up. Quinn Hughes is unreal right now.
Well,
maybe they find a way to sneak in and kick out a team like, good luck, it's Colorado Avalanche. Well, the West is a wild fight too.
Calgary was in there, I think.
Calgary's the second wild card spot right now, 51 standings points. The Canucks are the one team out with 50.
Yeah,
gonna be a fun run.
To come down. You're gonna need somebody to drop down. That's not Calgary to keep that hope alive of the 7-team Canadian playoff.
See how it goes. The West is just as tight except for one spot.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? Every team's close, and that would be fascinating. And boy, would it make Canadian media happy.
Oh my goodness, they would be celebrating in the streets for the first day of the playoffs, and then 4 weeks later, they'd be like, "Well, our hope lies in the Edmonton Oilers again." No,
after they beat the Kings again.
We'll have to wait and see and reevaluate, honestly, closer to the Four Nations face-off, because a lot of this can change when it comes to standings. Between, especially in the East, a lot of this can change between now and the beginning of Four Nations face-off in the second week of February. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to our channel, or you can check us out anywhere you get your podcast from. Make sure that you rate and review there as well. 5 stars would be appreciated. Anything less, and honestly, you could just DM us your reactions and your opinions. But that's going to do it for this one. We will see you guys next time.